Wow, what a beautiful morning. Who'd want to be anywhere else than on the beach? It's yeah, nice, no wind, little swell, nice flat beach. So yeah, looking forward to it. Just to add another dimension though, I'm going to catch some beach worms. I'm going to try with my fingers and a set of pliers, and I'll show you how I do both techniques. So let's get it started. Now these little critters can be difficult to catch at times, especially if you're a learner. It usually takes a little while to get to know how to catch them, but once you do, everything's fine. You can see nice flat beach, incoming tide, so hopefully we'll be able to get a few. And yeah, I'll just show you how I get them. You can get them with pliers or catch them with your fingers, whatever you choose. Pliers for the beginner is probably the way to go, as they can be, I suppose most people see them as being very quick, in that they stick their head a little bit out of the sand, a couple of millimeters. If you touch them, they disappear in an instant. So what do we know about beach worms? Well, they're not on every beach, I know that, but most beaches along the east coast of Australia, especially the along New South Wales coast, there seems to be worms. I've caught them in South Australia, in Queensland, so they're on most beaches. A couple of the beaches I found with really hard sand, south facing, have been lacking worms. I'm not sure why, but anyway, that's just the way it is. What else do we know about them? They're blind, so they can't see, but they're very sensitive to vibrations. So if you're stomping on the sand, there's a good chance that they won't like it. If you touch them, they don't tend to like that, so they'll disappear quickly under the sand once they come up. They do like to eat sort of fish flesh. They eat weed, kelp, anything pretty much that washes up on the beach. Or blubber as well, jelly blubber. They'll eat that, fill themselves up. After they've had a big feed like that, they're very reluctant to come up. And they have like 1,500 legs or more. I counted them one day and I got to about 1,500, and I thought, wow, that's a lot of pressure when you got 1,500 legs going against you when you're trying to pull them out of the sand. But yeah, they're powerful little units once they get to a decent size. So how big do they grow? Well, there's two types generally along the east coast of Australia: pinkies and greenbacks, or stumpies they call them. Now they grow to the pinkies, or the whiteheads as some people call them. They grow really long, but they're very thin. They grow up to 2.5 meters. I've caught them in length. The other ones, the stumpies or the greenbacks, they don't grow quite as long. Now different beaches seem to have different sized worms on them. Some beaches they're very short, up to like 40 centimeters. You'll get the same thickness of worm on another beach, and it can be almost 2 meters long. When they get that big, I tell you, they are difficult to get out of the sand, unless you can get when they're digging their heels in, that's for sure. You've got to try and get them so they're relaxed, then you can whip them out of the sand. But there's a technique in doing that. You'll do it with your finger and thumb, but when it comes to using pliers, it's a different story. They lock up, and yeah, they generally break off. So I wouldn't suggest when you're trying to get big worms that you use your pliers. What else we know about them? They're in the intertidal zone, so they're between the low water mark and the high water mark. When's the best time? And I saw some fisheries guys once doing a worm count, and I asked them, when do you do the worm count? And they said, oh, always at low tide. Well, in my experience, a lot of the worms, or the best worms, are coming up from around the half tide mark. So you don't see many. You get to about half tide in and they start to appear, like especially the bigger ones. So you know, they probably learned stuff at university, not in actual practice. If you're just starting out trying to catch beachworms, or if you've been trying for a while but had no success, I want to show you a little technique with pliers, because I think pliers are probably the quickest way to learn to catch your first beachworm. A little technique that you probably, even experienced people, probably not aware of when using a pair of pliers. And I don't mean the pliers that snap together that you buy that are supposedly worm pliers. I'm talking about, I just use a pair of stainless steel pliers like that. So that's them. But with these, there's actually only one side of the pliers moves. So when it's in your hand, let me show you. So when it's in your hand like that, that side that's in the palm of your hand virtually doesn't move, but it's your fingers that are actually moving. Of course, that moves the other end of the pliers, whereas the point of the tip of the pliers on the left hand side is not moving, but the right hand side is. So when you're catching a worm, say for instance, there's the worm there, and you're bringing the pliers in, you get that side that's, see how only one side's moving? Just remember, worms are blind, so they can't see what's going on, but they're very sensitive to vibration. So don't bump the sand too much or tread too heavily when you're trying to catch it. But if that's the worm, you get that side of the pliers that doesn't move and bring the other side in like that. So the time, they haven't got as much time to disappear under the sand. If you're going this way, put the side that moves, you're moving the worm right across there, and because they're so quick, by the time you do that, they've vanished. So that's it. You get this side of the pliers. If you're left-handed, I'm right-handed, but if you're left-handed, be the other way around. Get that side that doesn't move, come in and onto the worm. That'll give you a much higher percentage catch rate, or should enable you to catch your first worm anyway. So bang, like that, not like that. Not drag them across, because by the time those pliers get together, it's far too late. So there we go. Give pliers a go, and I'm not suggesting you use the so-called worm pliers that they sell, but get yourself a pair of, say, stainless steel pliers like I've got. Have a play around with them, get the worms coming out of the sand, and then make sure you get that stationary side of the pliers as close to the worm head as you possibly can. Or I shouldn't say the worm head, but as close to the worm as you possibly can before closing them up. And then it's just quite a snap movement, a rapid movement, and you should have some success. So good luck, guys. So that's a beachworm looking for food. So that's how they come up. When they're coming up well, they come up about that distance. Sometimes in the winter time, or when the wind's blowing, and they're just not in the mood, they won't come up at all. If the sand's hard, or it's a bigger worm, you may need to dig down and grab the worm lower to stop it breaking as you pull it out. So that one was caught under the sand with my fingers. Whereas when you're using pliers, you need to catch them above the sand so the sand doesn't get caught in the pliers and prevent them from closing properly. Often the worm will slip through if there's sand in there. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. So that one I pulled out with my fingers. He's coming well out of the sand. He must have been pretty hungry, that one. Now let's just have a close look at catching these worms with your finger and thumb. Firstly, lure the worm to the surface. Then gently press your index finger and thumb down beside the worm. Feel for the worm and then slowly close in on it. If it's a big worm, dig, grab it lower and ease it out of the sand. What a worm! What a worm! Wow, just check out how long this worm is. Now this one is a pinky or whitehead, or sometimes known as a slimy, whereas the others I've been catching are greenbacks or stumpies. These are long and thin and very soft, so difficult to catch with pliers as they tend to break off. Now that's a medium-sized worm, but the really big ones, because they're covered in like a slime or a mucus, just hanging on to them with that bit of mucus on the or slime on the outside, they can easily slip through your fingers. So yeah, if you're catching them under the sand does help because you've got the sand creating a bit of a grip, which helps a lot. But getting back to that slime or mucus, you need to get that off the worm if you're going to keep them for a couple of days, because it actually sends the worm off. I'm not sure what's in it, but you're better off without it on. So what I'm going to do is go up to the dry sand. I'm going to wipe dry sand all over the worms, and then I'm going to drag that slime off between my fingers with the sand. I'll do that, then I'll put them in dry sand. If I'm going to keep them for a day or two, you're best to keep them in a really cool place, get that slime off, and the ones you catch with your finger, they'll stay alive for 2 or 3 days at least. And the ones with the pliers, if you catch them with pliers, it's a different story because you actually bruise in behind their head, so they don't tend to last as long, of course. If you're going to freeze them, getting the slime off and then putting them in dry sand is a good option. I go through a process where I use metho, so when I get them home I'll use a mixture of 50% metho, 50% water. I'll take the sand off the worm. I'll just wipe it off or wash it in a bit of water just to get it off. I'll put them in the metho mixture for about a minute and a half, then take them out. I'll put them in dry sand again, and then I'll put them in a plastic bag, a clip lock bag and just put them in the freezer. So if I'm coming home late one day and I want to go out for a night fish, for instance, I can just go to the freezer and pluck a bag out. I usually put the date on it so I know when they were caught. Or you can keep them alive in a bucket with an aerator, and I know the pros do that. They take a bucket with them, put them in there with the aerator, keeps them alive, then they can sell them to the outlets, fishing outlets, where people can go and buy them. But anyway, for now, let's go and just show you what I do to put them into some dry sand and get rid of that slime or that mucus from the outside of the worm. Here's a few worms. So I've only got a few, just enough to show you what I do with them. But yeah, so I'll just get the dry sand and we'll get into it. So we'll take a worm like this, cover it in sand. Now grab it by the head. Make sure you get the head because that's the hardest part, and just slowly wipe the sand off like that, and that'll actually take the mucus or that slime off with it. Alright, so just do it again, and then, yep, that's taken most of it off. I can feel now it's not very slimy at all. So just put a bit of sand on it, put it in your container. Another one, do exactly the same. There it is there. Slide it through your fingers. You can feel the slime and the sand coming off at the one time. Bit more sand on it, into your container. And again, this is a shorter worm, but the same thing. Put the dry sand on it, wipe the slime off, a bit more dry sand, and they'll last for days like that. And another small one, same thing. Drag the sand off, cover it in sand again. There it goes, into your container. So there we have our worms with the slime removed, ready to be stored for a couple of days if you need to. You could use them straight away, or you can use them tomorrow or the next day. If you're going to freeze them, you'll then take that sand off. Once you take the sand off, you can just wash them in water and put them in the metho and water mixture for about a minute, minute and a half, and then let them drain, put them in dry sand again, and put them in the freezer, ready to be used whenever you go out next. And you can just pluck the clip lock bag out of the freezer and away you go. So I had my worms back home, washed the sand off. Now I've got my methylated spirits, which I'm going to put into a container, and I'm going to put an equal amount of water into that as well. So here we go. So there's my container. You see the lines on there. So there's an equal amount of metho and an equal amount of water in the container now. So that's my solution for preserving the worms before I freeze them. So there's my worms. I've washed them, and I'm going to then take them out and put them in the metho mixture. Some have broken up. That doesn't matter. You break them up when you put them on the hook anyway. So there we go. So we'll give that a minute, minute and a half, and then we'll take them out. So I have a bucket of dry sand. Also have a
clip lock bag, which I'm going to put the worms in. So let's get started. So I've allowed my worms to drain for a while on an old towel, and I'm just going to put those into the dry sand, cover them in dry sand. Just like that. And I'll get this bag, sand in the bottom, and get the worms, place them in there. Just put enough in there for your next outing, and then seal it up. Try not to get too much sand in where you seal it, because it makes it difficult. Seal it up, and there you have it.
If you have any worming questions, just enter them in the comments below. Thanks for watching.